different developmental conditions can sometimes occur for autistic people. But do you know the connection between autism and dyslexia? Well, let's chat. Welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Orionkelly, that autistic guy. I'm all about providing validation and support for autistic people and their loved ones. The connection between dyslexia and autism. First up, what is dyslexia? So in general terms, dyslexia is a specific learning disorder, and it affects a person's ability to read, write, spell, and sometimes even speak. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate and fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Dyslexia is not the result of a lack of intelligence or motivation or even educational opportunities. No, dyslexia is a neurological condition, a difference in how the brain processes language. And in simple terms, for a dyslexic person, the brain can have difficulties in interpreting and processing letters and symbols, which can lead to challenges in connecting sounds to letters and recognizing words accurately. Let's explore how dyslexia can manifest in everyday life with some practical examples. First up is reversing letters or numbers. And to be more specific, an example of this could actually be confusing numbers and letters that look in the dyslexic mind the same. 6 and 9. As a parent of an autistic child, you may have alarm bells going off. Does your autistic child seem to always struggle? Differentiate B and D, the letters B and D, or the numbers 6 and 9, a sign of dyslexia. But how about this one? It's hard just to say. Phonological processing, I think. So do you struggle with phonological awareness, phonological processing? Is that even a word? What does that mean, Orion? Let me try to break this down. It's the ability to recognize and manipulate the sounds of spoken words. So basically, in practical terms, it's a difficulty breaking down words into their individual sounds or blending sounds together to form words. Another practical example of dyslexia, how about decoding? Do you have decoding and word recognition difficulties? Okay, so what does that mean? So we're talking about decoding, recognizing words, but more specifically, do you know words that to your mind are like bizarrely or, in your opinion, inappropriately spelled? Am I talking about a flower or a word? So words that are unfamiliar, words that are irregularly spelled. The hardest part of this, I reckon, by the way, is it makes reading slower, right? It makes reading harder, more laborious, riddled with reading errors, even omissions of words. I can relate to that. When when you're reading something and you just, I don't know what the hell that, and you just omit. It's like that word's gone. I remember reading books as a kid and there'd be some words and like, what is that? And you just you skip it, right? You move past it. Another example is plain old spelling difficulties. Dyslexia can make it hard to simply spell words correctly. This can be down to many things. Okay, so it's obviously the association to the sounds of the words, so breaking down the word, and more to that, the sounds of the words that go with the corresponding letters. Do you have an autistic child who might sound out a word but then not know what letter that sound is? I definitely have experienced this. Okay, so you're making the right sound. What letter is that? And the letter they come up with has no connection to that sound. And I guess another example of the spelling difficulties is just being unable to remember or get a grasp of like the spelling patterns of a word. But if you ask me, as an autistic person growing up and trying to learn, as all autistic people who face barriers to education, this next example of dyslexia may be one of the most detrimental to our ability to gain employment and keep it. And it's not about being able to read or spell, it's about reading comprehension. So we get it, dyslexia can affect our accuracy, our ability to simply read words on a page. But that snowballs and causes us to have a lack of comprehension. It's one thing to struggle to read the words on the page, but dyslexia also puts up a further barrier that impacts your ability to actually comprehend what you're reading. If you can't read something properly, if you can't comprehend it, you cannot learn it. If you cannot learn it, you cannot be assessed that you've learned it, and therefore pretty much no one wants to give you a job. This can be even as simple as not being able to understand the meaning of the words. So it's not just about not being able to read it or comprehend it, but not even understanding what you're reading. Like, what's the meaning of this word? What does this word mean? I think I can read it, but what does it even mean? I'm just reading it to read it. Dyslexia can also affect your writing ability. What does that mean? Okay, well, your writing skills aren't great. You may have inconsistent handwriting, messy handwriting, poor grammar, and even a difficulty in organizing your thoughts in a coherent manner on the page. So you have the thoughts, but putting them down on paper in a coherent manner may be difficult. Word retrieval challenges, another practical example of dyslexia. So I'm talking about the ability to retrieve words from memory, which I guess would lead as you're talking and can't retrieve words from memory, would lead to hesitation, would lead to disjointed conversations, pauses or breaks in not only writing, but speaking. And I added a little tidbit for those parents and carers of autistic people. Do they substitute strange words a lot? Like, you know they're saying something, but a word, you know they've substituted it because it just doesn't seem like it's the right word. It's out of place. So if that happens a lot, there's like these substitute words that in your mind don't seem right, but you kind of can see what they're going for. That is a really great example of how dyslexia can manifest. But did you know dyslexia can actually affect your directional abilities? Yeah, dyslexia can actually affect your spatial awareness, sense of direction, ability to read maps, to take directions or give directions. It can even make it more challenging to understand your left from your right. This may be a big thing for some autistic people, remembering left and right. This is actually part of dyslexia. What's really interesting, and we can talk about the connection in a sec, but what's really interesting is as I go through some of these practical examples of dyslexia, some of them are going to sound very similar to an autistic experience. Hence why I'm doing this video. Did you know that a difficulty with time management can also be a sign of dyslexia? Estimating and managing time effectively is part of dyslexia. A difficulty in estimating and managing time effectively is also part of dyslexia. Struggles with organization, another example. So this can manifest in a difficulty in organizing your own thoughts, belongings, even tasks. You may also struggle to prioritize tasks. Even following multi-step instructions can be really hard for a person with dyslexia. But you may think, what about this next one? A practical example of dyslexia can be sensory sensitivities. Yeah, people with dyslexia can experience sensory sensitivities to things like sound and light and touch. And these sensitivities can make it really difficult to focus on tasks. Now, we've already talked about writing difficulties, but I want to just zero in for a second on handwriting. Those with dyslexia may have what could be classed as illegible handwriting. You cannot make sense or read their handwriting. Now, this can be due to many challenges, including letter spacing, letter formation, even consistency. And these difficulties can actually manifest in ways that I can relate to, which is things like note-taking or difficulties with the dreaded filling out forms. Dyslexia also provides challenges with math concepts. So it's not just about reading and language skills. It can also impede your ability to understand, to comprehend, to process mathematical concepts. Another example is a difficulty in following oral instructions. In other words, those with dyslexia can find it really hard to both process and retain information that's been given to them orally, spoken to them. Particularly though, and this is important, particularly if it's presented quickly or in a complex manner. Easily fixed though. You could just repeat instructions. You could just write down the instructions in simple, understandable steps. This may sound simple, but an obvious and clear example of dyslexia is in fact an avoidance of reading and writing tasks. So dyslexia obviously manifests in a fear, an avoidance, a dislike, even a hate of reading and writing. Honestly, the connection between autism and dyslexia is an intriguing yet really complex area of study. And while autism and dyslexia are absolutely distinct neurodevelopmental conditions, emerging research suggests a notable overlap in both traits and neurobiology. Some studies have suggested alterations in brain connectivity and activation patterns in autistic people and those with dyslexia, particularly in regions of the brain involved in language processing. One compelling aspect of the connection between autism and dyslexia is actually the presence of some shared behavioral characteristics. Now, we have already touched on this on some of the examples of how dyslexia can manifest. But to sum it up, we're talking about these shared challenges in things like social interaction, understanding social cues, interpreting facial expressions, even maintaining eye contact. Shared behavioral characteristics of both autistic people and those with dyslexia. Add to that, of course, the shared sensory sensitivities. Executive function challenges, difficulties with working memory, attentional control, and cognitive flexibility. All other common features observed in both autistic people and those with dyslexia. To learn more about other co-occurring conditions, check out my video, An Autistic Guide to Alexithymia. Take back control and thrive.